The owner of a luxury mansion is shocked when he encounters the beauty and charisma of the humble pizza delivery girl and falls in love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The sun was setting behind the rolling hills that encircled the Falcone estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. High walls of ornately carved stone surrounded the mansion, a fortress of luxury perched on the edge of the city. In front of the colossal iron gates, an elegant fountain with mythological sculptures sprinkled water into the twilight air. For any passerby, this palatial sight was as imposing as it was enchanting. Most hardly dared to guess at the secrets concealed within those glowing windows. Inside the mansion's grand foyer, Alessandro Falcone stood by a tall window, absorbed in his own thoughts. At 32, he was the youngest heir to the vast Falcone fortune and carried himself with the quiet confidence expected of someone raised in privilege. His sharp jawline, dark hair neatly combed back, and eyes always lost in consideration gave him an air both magnetic and distant. Yet, for a man who possessed wealth envied by many, Alessandro seemed haunted by a silent restlessness. Tension simmered in every corridor of the house. The staff had noticed Alessandro's persistent moodiness in recent weeks. He lingered alone in the study, gazing at ledgers and old photographs as if searching for answers to questions unspoken. In broad social gatherings, Alessandro's presence invariably commanded a room, but behind closed doors, a gentle sadness tugged at him. Tonight, the hush of the house was nearly overwhelming. The only sound was the trickle of water from the fountain outside and the faint buzzing of overhead lights. In the estate's private office, Alessandro's cousin and close confidant, Christian, quietly set down a stack of documents. Tall and lean with a quick mind for numbers, Christian oversaw many of the family's business affairs. His eyes darted from the papers to his cousin. "Alessandro," he said, voice echoing in the stillness, "these expansions into new properties, you've asked me to revisit them for the third time. Are you sure you want to push forward? The returns will be massive, yes, but the risk—" Alessandro sighed. "I'm tired of expansions, Christian. We own half the city's prime real estate as it is." His fingers tapped the polished mahogany desk. "We keep expanding, but something doesn't feel right. Do we need more? Does any of this truly matter?" Christian studied him with concern. Alessandro's hesitation went beyond mere business dealings, Christian could sense. Some intangible feeling was gripping his cousin. In the distance, thunder rumbled, although the forecast had predicted a clear night. Outside the mansion's imposing gates, the final rays of daylight had vanished. A small scooter came to a halt near the intercom. On it rode a young woman wearing a simple, clean but worn uniform, the logo of La Bella Pizza emblazoned on her cap. Her name was Martina Rossi. 24, with round brown eyes sparkling with earnest determination, she worked 2 jobs to help pay for her mother's medical bills. Despite the exhaustion etched on her face, her expression held a warmth that came naturally. Rain clouds threatened in the sky, and she shivered slightly under the breeze rolling in from the hills. She double-checked the address on the slip of paper clipped to the pizza box. It read, Falcone Mansion, Gate E, Redwood Lane. Seeing the legendary name left her throat dry. She had only heard tales of the Falcones, reputedly philanthropic, yet impossibly private. Martina pressed the buzzer. "Hello? This is Martina from La Bella Pizza. I have an order for the Falcone family?" For a moment, there was no answer. The gates stood silent, as though the entire compound was asleep. Then a crackle of static, and a man's voice responded, "Drive around to the side entrance, please. Someone will meet you there." Martina gulped. The place was intimidating. It might have been easier to deliver a pizza to the Tower of London. Nevertheless, she swung the scooter to the side gate, which creaked open just enough to let her through. Lights from the mansion's security system flickered, guiding her to a smaller door along the eastern wall. She parked, feeling a quiver of anxiety. Homes of such scale were rarely welcoming to outsiders. The staff's eyes would be on her, she was sure. Yet nobody appeared. The side door was open a crack, revealing a gleaming corridor beyond. "Hello?" she called softly, stepping inside. The hush was uncanny. Martina's heart thumped. She had never ventured onto the property of someone so powerful. A few steps in, she found herself in a small foyer lined with paintings. Then footsteps broke the silence, clicks echoing against the marble floor. Out of the shadows came a woman wearing a severe black dress, her hair pinned neatly in a tight bun. "You're late," the woman said curtly, her posture stiff, her stare critical. I'm sorry, ma'am," Martina replied, voice trembling. "We had a rush of orders. I came as fast as—" "There's no need for explanations," the woman interrupted. She raised her chin, eyes scanning Martina's scuffed shoes and simple uniform. "Master Falcone expects timeliness." She extended a hand for the box. "Wait here." Martina obeyed, puzzling over the abruptness. Minutes passed, and she swore she could hear distant thunder again. The hush pressed down on her, accompanied by the muffled hum of distant classical music. Then, from an adjacent corridor, Alessandro Falcone himself appeared. He wore a tailored shirt rolled at the sleeves, showing strong forearms. A faint trace of cologne hovered around him. He stopped short when he saw her. Immediately their gazes locked. Martina felt her breath catch, a tremor swirling in her stomach. His presence was magnetic. He possessed an intensity that reminded her of summer storms. Alessandro had not expected to find a stranger there at this hour. He blinked at the pizza box, then at the young woman's face. She had wide, earnest eyes, a gentle posture, and the faintest flush from traveling in the chilly evening. Something about her was disarming, an unaffected sincerity that stood out in the cold, polished atmosphere of the mansion. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. "You brought the pizza? I didn't realize we had—" He halted, trailing off. For a moment, silence enclosed them both. The air felt charged, as though an invisible thread had woven itself around them. Martina, forcing her gaze not to waver, nodded with a polite smile. "Yes, sir. Pepperoni with extra cheese and the side salad." She offered him the neatly wrapped pizza box and the small bag of salad containers. "I'm sorry if I'm late. The kitchen at my pizzeria was swamped, but I rushed over as soon as I could." A flicker of a smile tugged at Alessandro's lips, banishing the tension of the moment. He glanced at her name badge. "Martina. You came all the way up this hill in the dark just for a pizza delivery?" She nodded again. "This is my job, sir. I was surprised by the address, but I'm happy to bring it." He studied her a second longer, noticing details. The slight mud stains on her shoes, the damp ends of her hair from the approaching rain, the small calluses on her hands that suggested she worked much more than a single shift. It stirred in him something unexpected. He recognized that drive, that resilience. It was something he admired. "Thank you for going out of your way," he said softly, pulling out his wallet to pay. "I appreciate it." She accepted the payment with an appreciative nod. "Thank you, sir." She turned to leave, cheeks warming. Alessandro noticed how unsure she looked, yet so poised despite her modest attire. Before he could stop himself, he found his voice speaking again. "Wait, Miss Martina." He read her badge carefully. "Are you heading straight back?" She hesitated, wondering if she had broken some mansion rule. Alessandro continued, "It's getting dark, and the weather's turning. Let me at least ask one of my staff to ensure you make it back safely." From the hallway, the housekeeper who had first greeted Martina stiffened, offended by her employer's unusual kindness. She parted her lips to speak, but Martina gently shook her head. "I appreciate the offer," she said politely, "but I'll be fine. The scooter might not look like much, but we've been through all kinds of roads together." A faint laugh escaped Alessandro. He pressed the payment into her hand, far more than she was owed for a single pizza. Martina's eyes widened, immediately concerned that she'd been given a small fortune in tip, but Alessandro pressed a finger lightly to his lips, signaling her not to refuse. Grateful, she lowered her gaze. She had rarely encountered such generosity. Tucking the money into her pocket, she managed to smile. "Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Falcone." He watched her go, feeling an odd emptiness in the corridor once she slipped out the door. The entire encounter lingered. Her voice, her quiet determination, and a warmth that felt out of place in this marble fortress. There was something about her that he couldn't quite define, but in that single moment, the shadows weighing on him seemed to recede ever so slightly. In the hush of the foyer, Alessandro found himself walking back toward the window overlooking the driveway. He caught sight of Martina mounting her scooter, gingerly balancing the pizza delivery bag. The engine sputtered to life, and she vanished into the dark road leading down the hill. Thunder echoed again, as if the storm was mirroring the swirl of strange new sensations inside him. Far outside, beyond the imposing gates, Martina's heart pounded from more than just the climb. She couldn't deny the current that had passed between them, an inexplicable spark. Yet, she reminded herself, he was a Falcone, a man whose wealth and name dwarfed anything in her world. Soon, she reasoned, he would forget the humble girl in the battered uniform who had stepped into his domain for a fleeting moment. But as the storm clouds gathered in the sky, neither Alessandro Falcone nor Martina Rossi realized that their chance encounter was no mere coincidence. Forces more potent than wealth or status had awakened, forging a connection that would unravel the deepest corners of each of their lives. Night descended fully by the time Martina reached the modest apartment she shared with her mother. Fumbling for keys in the dimly lit corridor, she pushed open the creaking door to a small living room that doubled as a bedroom. The cloying scent of antiseptic blended with the lingering aroma of evening soup her mother had prepared hours before. A single lamp illuminated the worn sofa and a few family photographs, reminders of gentler times. Her mother, Sophia, slowly emerged from the adjoining room, leaning on a cane that helped relieve the pain in her left knee. She was a woman of fragile health, her gray-streaked hair pinned back neatly, her eyes always kind yet tired. The moment Sophia spotted Martina's face, she sensed an unusual tension. After so many years of raising her daughter alone, a mother develops a keen sense for the slightest shift in mood. "Martina," Sophia said, voice low with concern, "you look, flustered. Did something happen at work?" Martina set her delivery bag on the chipped kitchen table. She forced a reassuring smile, carefully removing her cap. "It was just a busy night, that's all, Mama." Her eyes flicked toward a stack of unpaid medical bills pinned by a magnet on the fridge door, an ever-present reminder of their difficulties. She hesitated, feeling the weight of the tip Alessandro Falcone had given her inside her pocket. It could pay part of their rent or cover her mother's next doctor's visit. The mere thought made her exhale relief. Sophia returned to her small room to rest, leaving Martina alone in the kitchen. She poured water into a glass and sipped in silence. The hush pressed on her ears. The only sound was the weak hum of a street lamp flickering outside. Closing her eyes, Martina found her mind drifting back to the Falcone mansion. She couldn't explain why she thought of it, or rather, of him. Alessandro Falcone's presence had been so calm, yet intense. His gaze had seemed to peer straight into her thoughts, leaving a whirl of unfamiliar emotions. Ridiculous, she told herself. Men like him never truly noticed people like her. Meanwhile, across the city's wealthiest district, Alessandro stood on the balcony of his bedroom, the hush of the night echoing in his ears. The Falcone estate sloped behind him, gardens meticulously kept, marble statues gleaming in what little moonlight broke through storm clouds. Yet Alessandro barely saw those details. He leaned on the balustrade, arms folded, scanning the city lights below. The earlier exchange played on a loop in his head, her shy smile, that unwavering, gentle determination. Christian joined him, a folder tucked under one arm. "I've been looking for you," he said softly. "We were meant to finalize the contract proposals for new property sites." He stopped, noticing Alessandro's distracted expression. "Is something bothering you?" A faint hush. Alessandro shook his head, inhaling the faint smell of impending rain. "I don't know, Christian. Something feels different tonight. And it started with the strangest thing, a pizza delivery." His cousin quirked an eyebrow. Before Christian could speak, Alessandro continued. "She walked in, shy and polite. Her name was Martina, and for reasons I can't explain, I can't shake the sense that meeting her matters." Christian was used to Alessandro's introspective moods, but was intrigued by the mention of someone new. "How so?" "She reminded me of everything I've overlooked. Authenticity, humility, that spark of genuine warmth. I've grown used to polite smiles that hold no substance. But from her, it wasn't forced. It was—" Alessandro paused as though searching for the correct word. "Real." A rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. Christian glanced at the sky. "I think a storm's rolling in," he said. "We should get inside." "But Alessandro, if this girl left such an impression, maybe it's worth exploring that feeling, even if you don't fully understand it." "I'm not sure how," Alessandro admitted, stepping back into his bedroom. His desk lamp glowed, illuminating scattered property files, business plans, and old family photographs. A Falcone chasing a pizza delivery worker? People would gossip. My father's old associates would see it as scandalous. But something in me says I can't just let this moment pass. Christian simply shrugged. "Do what feels right. You've never been the type to live for others' expectations." With a small grin, he left Alessandro alone, disappearing down the corridor. In bed, Alessandro tried to focus on the proposals awaiting him in the morning. Yet each time he closed his eyes, the memory of Martina's face appeared, her sincerity untouched by the mansion's grandeur. For a long time, sleep eluded him. Dawn arrived early, golden sunlight prying its way through the city's curtains. By 6, Martina was already awake, rolling dough in the back kitchen of La Bella Pizza. It was her second shift. From time to time, she helped the cooks in addition to delivering orders. She kneaded the dough vigorously, mind half occupied with the events of the previous night. The enormous tip from Alessandro burned in her pocket, an amount that felt too large for a simple pizza run. She decided to use part of it to handle an urgent medical test her mother needed, and with the rest, she would fix the leaky faucet in their apartment. And still, the memory of that fleeting moment with Alessandro lingered. She chastised herself for daydreaming. She had no time to lose in illusions. The pizzeria's manager, Giulio, a rotund man with a friendly manner, poked his head into the kitchen. "Martina, a word?" She dusted flour off her hands and joined him in the narrow office adjacent to the kitchen. Giulio was on the phone, glancing at her with a mildly worried expression. "We got a call. A big one," he said after hanging up. "Same address as last night, the Falcone estate. They want 3 large pizzas and a variety of sides. They specifically asked for you to deliver." Martina's brow creased. "Me? That's— Are you sure?" She felt a jolt of both excitement and uncertainty. She had never known a Falcone to place an order so soon, let alone request her by name. "That's what they said," Giulio confirmed, handing her a slip with instructions. "They want the delivery at noon. The only difference is they told me, no need to use the side entrance. They said you can bring it to the main door." Her heart thumped. I see. Then I'll prepare everything. Thank you, boss." Giulio pressed a fatherly hand to her shoulder. "Be careful, Martina," he said in a lowered tone, compassion in his eyes. "People like the Falcones. They're wealthy, powerful. Good tippers, yes, but big players. Keep your head on straight, yeah?" She nodded, grateful for his concern, and returned to the kitchen. Through the swirl of flour and sauce, she tried to steady her thoughts. The watch ticked slowly toward noon, her heartbeat seemingly synced to it. She could not deny a flicker of anticipation and worry. Meanwhile, at the Falcone estate, Alessandro waited by the front colonnade. It was unusual for him to stand in the open, scanning the long driveway leading to the main gate. A few staff members exchanged puzzled glances, uncertain why the usually reserved heir was personally overseeing a pizza order. The same housekeeper from the night before hovered at the edges of the foyer, lips pursed, suspecting there was more to this meal than mere appetite. At last, the same modest scooter appeared at the gate, weaving carefully up the winding drive. Martina, wearing her standard uniform, came to a halt in front of the tall fountain. Dusting her brow, she turned off the engine. Alessandro approached, something akin to relief flashing in his eyes. When he reached her, he offered a courteous nod. "Hello again. I hope it wasn't too much trouble." Martina tilted her head, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Not at all, signore. It's my job, after all. Thank you for requesting me. Here are the pizzas and sides. I'll just need a signature on the receipt." She was all business, her politeness unwavering. Yet he sensed a gentle warmth behind her composure. He waved her toward the entry hall. "Actually, could we speak for a moment inside? There's something I'd like to show you." He spoke with the care of a man stepping across a narrow bridge, anxious about her reaction. Martina blinked. Hesitation momentarily pinned her to the spot. She glanced back at the door, half expecting the stern housekeeper to appear and forbid her from stepping on those pristine marble tiles. "All right," she managed. Carrying the pizzas, she followed Alessandro into a wide, sunlit corridor leading off from the main foyer. Antique mirrors, gilded frames, and grand paintings decked the walls. Every footstep echoed, her old sneakers squeaking faintly on polished floors. Martina felt miles away from the humble neighborhood she knew. Yet Alessandro's voice, calm and earnest, guided her forward. He stopped at a side chamber, a spacious, high-ceilinged room with tall windows overlooking the estate's manicured gardens. Various architectural drawings cluttered a large table. Expansions Alessandro was planning, philanthropic projects he had hinted at, and half-finished sketches that he'd created himself. Martina set the pizzas down carefully, trying not to drip sauce on anything that looked valuable. "Apologies if this feels abrupt," Alessandro said, meeting her gaze. "I just wanted you to see my work. My family invests in many ventures, but I've been working on something different. Building community centers in neighborhoods that lack resources. It's a personal project of mine." His eyes gleamed with a subdued but sincere enthusiasm. "I'm not sure why, but after meeting you I realized it might help to get an opinion from someone who sees the city from a more ground-level perspective." Martina, taken aback, took a moment to absorb his words. A man of wealth and privilege was asking her thoughts about philanthropic expansions. She glanced at the sketches, multi-use spaces for families, vocational training rooms, modest recreational halls. She cleared her throat, cautiously pointing at one of the draft plans. "That area, there are many seniors who need free medical checkups. If you included a small clinic, they might get help without traveling far." Alessandro listened intently, nodding. "That's an excellent idea. And you think people would use it if it were near the central plaza?" Her eyes brightened. "Absolutely. My mother uses a cane, and we have to travel quite a distance for her tests. If there was a facility within walking reach, it would change so many lives." Their conversation flowed easily, an unexpected synergy arising between them. Alessandro jotted down notes, impressed by how quickly Martina identified challenges. For a moment, both seemed to forget they were from wildly different worlds. Her timid posture softened, replaced by quiet confidence, while Alessandro's guarded composure melted into genuine curiosity. Finally, Alessandro realized how much time had passed. He gestured to the pizza boxes, only then remembering they were growing cold. "Forgive me. I got carried away. Let's settle the payment for your delivery. And if you're not in a rush, maybe you could join me for a slice." Martina's cheeks warmed. Accepting an invitation inside a grand estate to share pizza with the owner was definitely not in her usual routine. She hesitated, thinking of her mother waiting. But the kindness in his voice chipped away at her apprehensions. I can spare a few minutes," she said softly. As they sat in that refined chamber, eating slices of pizza from cardboard boxes, a hush filled the mansion's corridors, as though the entire house was holding its breath. Outside, the storm clouds gathered once more, the sky rumbling as if to signal that something profound was steadily taking shape between two people from opposite worlds. The warmth of the midday sun bathed the chamber in a golden glow as Martina and Alessandro finished the last of the pizza slices. Despite the opulence surrounding them, expensive carpets, vaulted ceilings, paintings in gilded frames, the moment felt remarkably simple, even comforting. Martina couldn't quite process that she was seated across from one of the city's most influential heirs. Everything about him, from his posture to his manner of speaking, was both refined and surprisingly down-to-earth. Alessandro folded the empty pizza box with a hint of reluctance, as though wanting to prolong the meal. "I'd apologize for the unconventional lunch invitation," he said with a half-smile. "But honestly, this has been the most pleasant conversation I've had in a while." Martina glanced away, a shy laugh escaping. "Thank you for inviting me. I'm not used to sharing pizza in a house like this. Usually I just drop it off and go." He set the box aside, noticing her posture stiffen slightly. A moment of awareness flickered in his expression, as if he realized that the lines between them, employer and employee, wealthy heir and working-class delivery girl, couldn't just vanish because of a shared meal. But the genuineness of her company intrigued him, and he was in no hurry to return to endless property deals and formalities. Clearing her throat, Martina rose to her feet, mindful of the time. "I should get back," she said gently, brushing crumbs from her uniform. "Thank you again for asking my opinion on your projects. I hope it helps." He stood up too, pressing a hand to his chest in a gesture of respect. "It did, truly. Would it be all right if I contacted you again?" The question hung in the air, light yet loaded with possibility. "For advice," he added quickly, though something in his gaze suggested he wasn't speaking solely of architectural advice. Martina felt her cheeks flush. She could practically hear her own pulse. "Sure," she managed. "If you need more ideas about the community centers, you can call the pizzeria, I guess." His lips curved in a thoughtful smile. "I might do that." Then, with a courteous nod, he guided her back through the winding corridor. The household staff, quietly stationed near the foyer, exchanged knowing looks among themselves. No one dared voice their curiosity, but the silence bristled with unspoken questions. Why had Master Falcone spent so much time with a delivery girl? They reached the front door and Alessandro paused. "Let me at least walk you to your scooter," he offered. "I'd hate for you to get lost in our front gardens." She was about to politely decline, but seeing a flicker of earnestness in his face, she accepted with a gentle nod. Outside, the estate's main driveway stretched before them, lined with immaculately trimmed hedges. The fountain gurgled softly, water catching the sunlight in diamond-like sprays. The hush was broken only by the distant sound of chirping birds and the crunch of gravel under their shoes. As they approached her scooter, Martina noticed how the estate walls loomed around them, high and imposing. She wondered how someone could live in such grandeur and not feel caged. Alessandro must have caught her expression. "Sometimes," he said, as though reading her thoughts, "the walls feel more like prisons than protection." She glanced at him. "I suppose people believe you have it all, but maybe not the freedom." He looked at her with grateful surprise, appreciating her insight. "We all have our own responsibilities," he said simply. Then, after a moment, he unlocked the scooter's helmet from the seat, handing it to her. "Drive safe." She thanked him, started the engine, and carefully descended the winding path. Alessandro stood by the fountain, watching until she disappeared beyond the gates. A subtle ache settled in him, a longing he barely recognized. It was as if a door had opened in his carefully managed life, revealing sunlight he hadn't realized he needed. Later that afternoon, Martina hurried into her apartment, eager to tell her mother she had earned extra tips from the Falcone delivery. But she found the living room empty, and the small bedroom door half closed. Through the gap, she glimpsed her mother Sophia lying down, face contorted in discomfort. Alarmed, Martina slipped inside. "Mama," she whispered, gently sitting on the edge of the bed. "What's wrong? Is it your knee?" Sophia's breathing was shallow. Beads of perspiration dotted her forehead. "It's worse than usual," she admitted, grimacing. "I took my medication, but the pain isn't going away. I might need to go to the clinic." Concern tightened Martina's chest. She knew the local clinic was short-staffed and often required appointments booked weeks in advance. Private hospitals were out of the question financially, yet seeing her mother in pain galvanized her. "Then we'll go, Mama. I'll find a way." "We can't just wait." Sophia opened her mouth to protest. The cost, the inconvenience, but Martina's resolute expression gave her pause. "All right," she relented. Martina tenderly helped her mother to her feet, supporting her as they moved slowly toward the door. "Lean on me," she whispered. "We'll take a taxi. It'll be quick." Half an hour later, they were waiting in a cramped, fluorescent-lit clinic hallway. A bored receptionist had asked them to take a seat, advising they might be there for some time without an appointment. Martina exhaled, frustrated but determined. She remembered Alessandro mentioning ideas about clinics and community centers. Perhaps someday people like her mother wouldn't have to endure these lines and indefinite waits. She refused to let her mother see her anxious tears. Instead, she gave Sophia's hand a small squeeze, trying to exude calm. When finally called, they were ushered into a small examination room. The doctor on duty pressed gently around Sophia's knee, wincing each time she cried out in pain. "We'll need more tests," he said gravely. "The X-ray shows possible deterioration, maybe nerve involvement. An MRI would clarify." Martina's heart sank. MRI scans were expensive, far beyond the meager funds she'd set aside even with the new tips. But seeing Sophia's agony, she resolved there was no choice. "We'll do it," she said firmly, "whatever it costs." The doctor scribbled down some notes and referrals. "Schedule it soon. The longer you wait, the worse it may get." That night, Martina scarcely slept. She stared at the slip of paper listing the MRI price. Even with the money from Alessandro, it was still a steep amount. She considered picking up more shifts at the pizzeria, or maybe finding a second part-time job, or a third. Anything to ensure her mother didn't suffer. Exhaustion clawed at her, but she pushed it aside. She had to be strong. Meanwhile, at the Falcone estate, Alessandro paced in the study, his mind drifting between philanthropic plans and the memory of Martina's bright gaze. He found himself replaying their conversation about clinics, about the challenges faced by families who couldn't afford top-tier medical care. He thought of the architectural sketches laid out on the large table, and something stirred in him, a desire to put these plans into action faster, to truly make a difference, not only to help people in general, but possibly, though he barely acknowledged this, because he knew how much it mattered to someone he'd just met. Christian entered, carrying a few property dossiers. "You've been busy," he remarked, noting the new notes Alessandro had scrawled across the sketches. "Expanding the community center idea to include a small health facility? That's ambitious." Alessandro straightened, a determined glint in his eye. If we're going to build something, let's build it properly. A modest medical wing could change lives. Why wait? Christian studied him, impressed by the conviction in his tone. No reason, he said gently. We have the funds, and if it aligns with your new philanthropic direction, I can start making calls tomorrow. We might need city council approvals, but we have connections for that. Alessandro nodded, though something made him pause. He recalled old partnerships with city officials who were more interested in profit than genuine aid. His father's circle, especially, was infamously pragmatic. Any philanthropic move had to show them a return. We have to do this carefully, Alessandro said, thinking aloud. I don't want it to get tangled in politics or overshadowed by greed. If father's associates sense there's no profit, they'll pressure us. Christian could see Alessandro's concern. Leave it to me. I'll handle the delicate negotiations. Alessandro sank into a leather armchair, grateful for his cousin's support. The Falcone family empire was a machine, powerful but cautious when it came to altruism. Still, the idea of forging a real solution to help people from less privileged backgrounds filled Alessandro with renewed purpose, and a certain pizza delivery woman's earnest face hovered in his thoughts, reinforcing his resolve. As night wore on, storm clouds gathered once more, lightning flickering in the distance. The wind whipped across the estate's gardens, rustling the ancient oaks. In her modest apartment, Martina dozed fitfully next to her mother, mindful of every pained breath Sophia took. And in the grand study, Alessandro found himself wanting to call the pizzeria, if only to hear Martina's voice, maybe ask how she was, if she had more ideas. Yet he hesitated, knowing it might be too forward, too soon. Eventually, both drifted into uneasy sleep, Martina dreaming of rising medical bills and Alessandro envisioning crowded waiting rooms transformed into well-equipped clinics. Outside, thunder rumbled, a dramatic undertone to the silent vow each held, to push forward with new plans, to somehow bridge the distance between them. In separate corners of the city, neither recognized fully how their worlds were on a collision course, drawn by a force far more potent than money, status, or chance. Gray clouds hovered above the city the next morning, muting the sunlight that would otherwise have brightened the streets. Martina woke early, shoulders tense with worry. Her mother's quiet groans from the adjacent bed told her the knee pain persisted. She rose silently, filled a small kettle on the stove, and made tea with chamomile. The mild warmth sometimes helped soothe Sophia's discomfort. The restlessness that had haunted Martina overnight still lingered, a gnawing sense that she needed to do more. The short walk to the pizzeria felt heavier than usual. She couldn't stop thinking about the daunting cost of her mother's MRI. But above all, she was haunted by the possibility of needing more invasive medical procedures if the tests revealed something serious. She toyed with the idea of leaving her mother in the care of neighbors while she picked up night shifts elsewhere. Some bar, convenience store, or cleaning job. Anything. Each scenario felt bleak. She was just one person, and the city demanded so much. When she entered La Bella Pizza, the usual rush of sizzling dough and aromatic tomatoes enveloped her. Giulio, the manager, was already barking instructions to the staff. Upon spotting Martina, he waved her over. "Hey," he said, voice low. "We just got a call. Another Falcone order. They asked for you again." Martina's breath caught. She tried to maintain composure as she tied on her apron. "Same address?" "Same estate, yes. They want several pizzas delivered in the early afternoon, and they mentioned they'd like you to bring them directly inside the main house. This is getting interesting." His eyes held a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You comfortable with that?" She nodded, forcing a smile. "It's all right. They've been very polite. I'll do it." Giulio patted her shoulder. "Just watch out for yourself, okay? Rich families like that, you never know how they operate." She gave him a quick nod, grateful for his care, and set to work. The morning flew by in a blur of flour, sauce, and the routine chaos of lunch-hour orders. Yet Martina's thoughts drifted repeatedly, conjuring up Alessandro's face. His calm expression, the moment he'd asked her opinions on health clinics, the way he'd made her feel heard, it all seemed so surreal. In the Falcone mansion's ornate study, Alessandro sat at a polished wooden table cluttered with blueprints and city council guidelines. Christian, sleeves rolled up, hovered beside him flipping through pages of notes. They'd already begun drafting a plan for the expanded community center concept, one that included a modest yet fully functional health clinic. Section B, Christian murmured, running his finger over a map. We'll have to approach the municipality for permits. The vacant lot is partly owned by a local developer, but given your name, we might be able to expedite the negotiations. Alessandro frowned slightly. I don't want to strong-arm anyone. Let's do it the right way. If we have to pay fair market value or offer them a stake in the project, so be it. But I want it known this is for public good, not some real estate flip. His cousin offered a faint smile. Understood. We'll tread carefully, and we'll need an architect who specializes in public structures. Your father's usual contact might demand a steep fee. Then we'll find someone else, Alessandro said firmly. I'm more concerned about function than about flashy design. We want a building that actually serves the community. He stood up, pacing near the broad windows overlooking the estate's gardens. His reflection in the glass showed a man on the cusp of something new. He still wore the mantle of wealth and responsibility, but his gaze carried a renewed resolve. Christian eyed him curiously. You're more invested in this project than I've ever seen you with any Falcone initiative. I know you've wanted to do philanthropic work before, but this time you seem driven, almost urgent. Alessandro paused, considering how much to reveal. I realize we have a responsibility, he said, keeping his tone neutral. If we can do something meaningful, we should. However, an image of Martina flickered in his mind, her shy laughter, her worn shoes. He wasn't sure how to articulate that perhaps she had inspired him, that her stories and her struggles had made it all feel starkly real. Anyway, he concluded softly, let's finalize the plan. We'll contact the city council after lunch. Christian nodded. Got it. By the way, the pizzas you ordered, they'll arrive soon, right? He managed a playful smirk, aware that Alessandro had personally requested Martina again. Should I clear your schedule? Alessandro rolled his eyes but couldn't hide an amused grin. We do have to eat, Christian, he said dryly. Besides, I promised the staff we'd treat them to lunch. Yet he couldn't deny, even to himself, that there was more to his repeated order than just feeding the household. Shortly after noon, Martina found herself once again driving up the winding Falcone driveway, balancing boxes of freshly baked pizza. The house loomed grand as ever, but she felt a touch less intimidated. She followed the same route to the main entrance, adjusting her uniform collar nervously. A security guard opened the grand double doors, greeting her with surprising cordiality. Inside the foyer, Alessandro waited, this time accompanied by Christian and a housekeeper pushing a cart. The atmosphere was less formal, perhaps even bustling. She noticed several staff members lingering in the background, apparently ready to help distribute the pizzas. Welcome back, Alessandro said with a bright smile. He gestured toward Christian. This is my cousin, Christian Falcone. He handles a lot of our family's business matters. Pleasure to meet you, Christian said, giving her a polite nod. Thanks for bringing lunch. We have quite a crowd today. Some city officials and staff in the next room for a meeting. Martina offered a tentative smile. Of course, I'm happy to help. Where should I place everything? Alessandro motioned for the housekeeper to assist. We'll handle the setup. Would you mind following me for a moment? I wanted to show you something regarding those plans we talked about. Her heart skipped. Sure, if it's not an inconvenience. The quiet corridor they walked felt strangely familiar now. Sunlight filtered through tall windows onto patterned floors, giving the space a serene aura. As they entered the study, Martina spied the table covered with drawings. Architectural renderings and city maps were spread out, some pinned with sticky notes. Alessandro picked up one of the sketches, a preliminary layout for a community center with an attached clinic. "I'm pushing this forward," he said, voice filled with a quiet pride. "We're scouting for the right location, close to areas where people struggle to reach medical facilities. We'll still need approvals, but Christian's on it." Martina's eyes roamed the page. A stirring of emotion rose in her, admiration, relief, a certain hope. "You've done so much in just a few days," she said softly, momentarily forgetting her role as a delivery worker. "A clinic, especially. People can't imagine how it might change their lives until it's there." He leaned closer, pointing to a corner of the blueprint. "We added a small pharmacy section, and next to it, a lounge area for seniors or those waiting for tests, a wide ramp for wheelchairs." "That's great," she whispered, thinking of her mother's difficulty climbing steps. "It's amazing." Their gazes caught, a subtle intensity growing in the hush of the study. She felt warmth spread through her chest, an odd mixture of gratitude and something deeper she didn't quite name. Meanwhile, Alessandro seemed equally affected, his usual composure wavering. The hum of distant conversation in the mansion drifted through the walls, but in that moment they stood as though isolated in a bubble of shared purpose. Christian's voice broke the silence from the doorway. "The officials are ready, Alessandro. They're asking for you." He cast an apologetic glance at Martina. "Sorry to interrupt." Alessandro nodded, reining in his expression. "Yes, of course." He turned to Martina, voice gentle. "I'll walk you back. Then I must handle the meeting." She smiled politely, her professional composure returning. "No worries, I understand. Thanks for showing me the plans." They headed out to the foyer where the staff was still distributing pizzas. One of the city officials, a middle-aged council member with a stern face, studied Martina curiously as she passed. She felt self-conscious under his lingering stare, recognizing a flicker of disapproval at seeing the Falcone heir so attentive to a mere pizza delivery person. Once at the front door, Alessandro lowered his voice. "I hope you'll come by again. We may have new updates soon. If you're okay with it, I'd like to keep asking you for insight. What works, what doesn't?" Martina's heart fluttered, but she maintained a modest composure. "Of course, I'm always happy to share what I know." He hesitated, as if wanting to say more. Instead, he handed her a folded envelope. "Payment for the pizzas, plus a little extra for your time. Thank you." She accepted it gingerly. "Thank you, Mr. Falcone. Have a good day." As she turned and departed, Alessandro watched after her, that now familiar sense of loss creeping in as soon as she disappeared. Meanwhile, inside the study, Christian and the officials were waiting. Alessandro squared his shoulders, composure sliding back into place. There were still negotiations to manage, budgets to discuss. But the fleeting brightness Martina brought lingered, urging him forward. That evening, Martina returned home carrying groceries, a rare abundance purchased with the fresh tip. She smiled at her mother, who reclined on the sofa with her leg propped up. Sophia seemed slightly better, though far from well. They shared a meal of warm soup and bread, quietly savoring the small comfort. Then, with a resolve sparked by the day's events, Martina broached the subject of scheduling the MRI as soon as possible. "Are you sure we can manage the cost?" Sophia asked, voice frail. Martina nodded, trying to exude confidence. "I'll work extra shifts, and some funds have come in recently. Don't worry, Mama. We'll make it happen." She didn't mention that a large portion of the money came from the Falcone tips, nor that her heart twisted in guilt at using it for personal needs. But practical realities prevailed. Her mother's health came first. Late at night, As the city's lights glimmered through their thin curtains, Sophia fell asleep, lulled by the medication. Martina lay awake on the sofa, her thoughts circling. A swirl of images danced behind her eyes. The imposing Falcone mansion, Alessandro's gentle expression as he explained the clinic blueprint, her mother's pained smiles. She found herself smiling faintly in the dark, a tiny flame of hope igniting within her. Perhaps in this strange intersection of her life and the Falcone family's world, something good might emerge. At the Falcone estate, the meeting with city officials had concluded successfully. Alessandro had navigated the usual political flattery, the friction over land use, and the hidden agendas with an air of polite yet firm determination. Christian had watched his cousin with pride. Alessandro was stepping into his own role, not as a mere heir to wealth, but as someone championing a cause. When the last official left, Alessandro sank into a chair, relief flooding him. Christian handed him a glass of water, and for a long moment they sat in companionable silence. "You know," Christian said finally, "they're intrigued by your plan. They also see your sincerity. That's not easy to fake." Alessandro nodded, swirling the water in his glass. "Good, because I meant every word." He stared at the documents the officials had left, permits to be signed, revised proposals. The door to a philanthropic venture was opening, yet it would require constant vigilance. He already suspected some city leaders wanted to exploit this project for their own gain. But overshadowing all these concerns was a single thought, that he wanted the center built, and soon, so it could help people in real need. Eventually, Christian excused himself, leaving Alessandro alone. Outside, rain began to patter against the ornate windows, a soft drumming filling the mansion's quiet corridors. Alessandro strolled out to the balcony, letting the cool breeze ruffle his hair. Gazing over the rain-drenched gardens, he whispered, "I hope she's all right." He found himself longing to pick up the phone, call the pizzeria, and ask for her by name. Yet he hesitated, uncertain if that would overstep boundaries. A small voice inside told him that, perhaps for Martina, his sudden attentiveness might seem strange or intrusive. The memory of her hesitant smile reminded him that she was proud, independent. If he wanted her trust, he had to tread gently. But an undercurrent of anticipation thrummed in his chest. Their connection was a fragile, promising thing, like a sapling in a storm. Already it had grown deeper than he'd anticipated. With the house silent except for the rain, Alessandro allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and silently vowed, no matter the complexities, he'd press on with the clinic project. Whether or not it brought him closer to the woman whose advice had lit a new spark, he couldn't say. But he sensed that her influence had reshaped his course, and for once in his life, he felt profoundly certain it was the right direction. As thunder growled in the distance, both Alessandro and Martina found themselves staring at the night sky. Two souls in separate corners of the city, each wondering what tomorrow might hold. And though neither admitted it aloud, both clung to the fragile hope that something extraordinary was unfolding in the space between their worlds. The next morning dawned, quietly overcast. Raindrops from the night's passing storm still glimmered on windowsills across the city. Martina stepped out of her apartment building, carefully maneuvering around a few lingering puddles. She usually took the bus to the pizzeria, but today she was heading somewhere else first. The hospital, where she hoped to schedule her mother's MRI. She knew the route by heart. Civic buildings and corner shops whizzed by as she rode her scooter along roads still damp from rain. Her mother, Sophia, had pleaded to come along, but Martina insisted on going alone. The frustration of navigating endless medical bureaucracy was something she'd rather shoulder by herself. The city hospital complex rose from behind a cluster of trees, concrete, institutional, and sprawling with seemingly endless corridors. Inside, The hospital's main foyer bustled with patients, nurses, and visitors. Martina breathed slowly, anxious but determined. She joined the line at the registration desk, behind a chain of weary individuals, parents cradling infants, an elderly couple clutching each other's hands. This was the reality of public health care: overworked staff, limited resources, and far too many in need. Martina gripped Sophia's referral slip, swallowing the knot in her throat. When her turn arrived, the receptionist, a young man wearing glasses and a harried expression, scanned the referral and typed at his computer. "We have an opening," he said, not looking up, "but it won't be for another 2 weeks." Martina's heart sank. 2 weeks felt like an eternity when she saw Sophia struggling every day. "Please," she said, voice subdued yet firm. "Is there any sooner date? My mother's pain is getting worse." The receptionist exhaled, pressing more keys. "I'm sorry, the machine's fully booked. We get cancellation requests from time to time, but it's unpredictable. You can call daily to see if someone drops out." Disappointment weighed on her. "All right then, I'll do that. Thank you." She knew complaining further wouldn't help. Leaving the desk, she made her way outside, trying to hold on to a shred of optimism. At least she'd secured an appointment, late as it was. Meanwhile, at the Falcone estate, Alessandro found the morning surprisingly hectic. He and Christian had planned to finalize documents to officially propose their community center initiative to the city. Yet a barrage of calls greeted them. Some supportive voices, others suspicious. Certain influential acquaintances pressed for private meetings to discuss how they might personally benefit from the project. The undercurrent of opportunism irritated Alessandro, though he strove to remain courteous. By late morning, Christian knocked on Alessandro's office door. "We have a problem," he said, stepping inside. The lines on his forehead betrayed concern. Alessandro set aside a contract. "What happened?" Christian held up his phone. "I just got word that a rival group wants to build luxury condos on the same lot we're eyeing. They've fast-tracked their permits with help from some city council members." Alessandro's jaw tightened. But that land was designated for community projects decades ago. It should be zoned accordingly. "Apparently, the council is reconsidering the zoning," Christian replied, voice edged with frustration. "It's not final, but we need to act quickly." Alessandro paced near a bookshelf lined with his late mother's old novels. The push for personal gain from certain officials was no surprise. "Then we'll meet them head-on," he decided. "We have a legitimate plan that serves the public interest. Let's rally those on the council who still believe in public service. And if we must, we'll negotiate with the other side. Maybe they can divert their condo plan elsewhere." Christian nodded, relieved at Alessandro's resolve. "All right. I'll schedule urgent meetings. We'll need testimonies from potential beneficiaries to show how crucial a clinic is in that area." At that suggestion, Alessandro paused, remembering Martina's stories, her mother's struggles, the local families who all faced similar problems. "Testimonies, yes," he said slowly. "People who can speak personally about the hardships of limited medical access. We'll make sure the council hears real voices, not just lines on a proposal." Christian smiled, though a flicker of curiosity passed through his eyes. He suspected Alessandro had a specific person in mind, but he refrained from prying. "I'll gather everything. We need to move fast. There's talk of a council session tomorrow." After leaving the hospital, Martina hurried to the pizzeria, feeling drained. She tried to clear her mind and focus on tasks: kneading dough, prepping tomato sauce, stacking boxes for delivery. But her thoughts spun. 2 weeks until the MRI, and what if the results indicated surgery? How would they afford it? She was wiping down a countertop when the restaurant phone rang. Giulio answered, chatted briefly, then waved her over. "Martina, it's for you." Confused, she removed her gloves and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" A deep, familiar voice resonated. "Martina? It's Alessandro." She nearly dropped the phone. He sounded warm, yet businesslike, as though balancing caution with sincerity. I hope I'm not interrupting." She breathed quickly, glancing around. Some co-workers were within earshot but mostly preoccupied. "No, not at all. Is everything okay?" His hesitation was palpable even through the line. "Yes, everything's fine. Actually, we need help. Christian and I are meeting with the city council tomorrow about the community center. We want them to hear from people who face real medical barriers. It's short notice, but if you're willing to come and speak, it could make a big impact." Her stomach flipped. The idea of speaking before a council was daunting. Public speaking had never been in her comfort zone. Still, she couldn't deny the project's importance. She glanced at a sauce stain on her apron, mind whirling. I'm not sure if I'm the right person," she stammered. "I've never talked in front of officials like that." "It doesn't have to be formal," Alessandro assured her, voice gentle. "Just share what it's like for you and your mother, the obstacles you face daily. It could help them understand why a clinic is so crucial. But I won't pressure you. I only ask that you consider it." Martina felt a spark of warmth at the respect in his tone. He wasn't demanding, but rather imploring her as an equal. After a moment, she swallowed. "All right," she said softly. "I'll do it. If it helps the cause, yes." He let out an audible sigh of relief. "Thank you. Christian and I will handle all the formalities. The session is tomorrow afternoon at City Hall. I can arrange transportation, or—" "I have my scooter," she interjected, a small laugh escaping at how easy it was to slip into casual banter with him. "I'll be fine." "All right. Thank you, Martina. I appreciate it more than I can say." When she hung up, her cheeks felt warm, a mixture of nerves and an inexplicable excitement that overshadowed her exhaustion. Tomorrow she would stand before powerful individuals. The notion was daunting, but if her voice could sway them to build a clinic, maybe countless families would be spared the ordeal she currently faced. That evening, the Falcone estate was again bustling. Christian on the phone orchestrating last-minute arrangements for the meeting, Alessandro poring over new data about local demographics and health statistics. Documents indicated hundreds of families in the proposed area lacked easy access to clinics. Reading through the numbers, he paused, recalling how Martina had described waiting for hours in crowded hallways with her mother. At some point, Christian stepped away from a call and found Alessandro hunched over the table, rifling through more files. "You're working yourself to the bone," he said, half in jest. "Might be wise to rest before tomorrow." Alessandro rubbed his eyes, nodding. "I will, but you said the council session is at 3 o'clock, right?" "I want every detail lined up, every argument prepared." He couldn't shake the sense that this was bigger than a typical philanthropic endeavor, something personal, more meaningful. His cousin studied him quietly. "You've changed, you know. A few months ago you were restless, dabbling in expansions but never fully invested. Now it's like you've found your purpose." Alessandro exhaled, setting a paper aside. "Maybe so. Or maybe I just realized real wealth means nothing if we aren't using it to help others. And if I can help even one person get easier medical care, then it's worth every ounce of energy." Christian smiled, patting Alessandro's shoulder. "Well said. Let's see how tomorrow unfolds." That night, Martina raced home, anxious about leaving Sophia alone too long. She found her mother napping on the sofa, the lines of pain still etched on her face. After reheating dinner, Martina gently woke her. As they ate, she mentioned the invitation to speak at the council session. Sophia looked surprised, pride and worry flickering in her eyes. "Are you sure you want to do that? Isn't it intimidating?" Martina nodded. "Yes, very. But the Falcone project could build a clinic. Imagine if we had a place nearby for your checkups. If my story helps them see the need, I have to try." Sophia's eyes glistened. "You've always been so strong, cara mia. Go then. Tell them our reality." Despite the encouragement, Martina barely slept. Scenes danced in her mind. A council hall filled with stern officials, Alessandro standing among them, Christian flipping through slides. She worried she'd mess up, stutter, or forget what to say. But a steadier part of her recognized that sharing her truth, raw and real, might do more to sway hearts than any statistic. When dawn broke on the day of the council meeting, Martina's anxiety churned, but she prepared carefully. She wore her best blouse, plain but neat, and tied back her hair to appear composed. Meanwhile, Alessandro had spent hours polishing his presentation, Christian finalizing the official documents. At midday, all three converged at City Hall, though Martina arrived separately on her little scooter, heart in her throat. City Hall loomed with towering columns and polished floors. Striding past bustling staff, Martina felt dwarfed. Yet the moment she spotted Alessandro and Christian waiting by the entrance, her shoulders eased. Alessandro gave her a grateful nod. "You made it." Nerves fluttered in her stomach. "Yes, I hope I can help." She held a stack of medical forms including copies of her mother's referrals, visible evidence of how the system's delays wore people down. They proceeded into a large chamber where council members sat at a broad semicircle table. Rows of chairs faced them, and a handful of spectators were present, local journalists, civic activists. At the front, Christian connected his laptop to a projector, nodding at Alessandro. The session commenced. First, Alessandro introduced the concept of the community center with a clinic extension. He spoke in a measured tone, describing the benefits, the land requirements, the philanthropic backing. Council members listened politely, some engaged, others skeptical. A couple of them asked abrupt, pointed questions about funding, maintaining staff, or whether the city might be liable for long-term operating costs. Then Alessandro paused and beckoned Martina forward. Her palms felt damp. Stepping to the lectern, she cleared her throat, meeting a range of gazes, some indifferent, others curious. "My name is Martina Rossi," she began, voice quivering slightly before she steadied herself. "I'm here as a daughter and caretaker. My mother, she's in constant pain, and we've spent hours in waiting rooms, days waiting for appointments. I have to juggle multiple jobs just to afford the most basic treatments. And it's not just us. In my neighborhood, there are countless families with elderly relatives or sick children who don't get proper care because everything is too far, too expensive, or too slow." Her voice began to flow with unexpected clarity. She explained how an accessible clinic would lift an immense burden, shortening travel times, reducing financial strain. She held up Sophia's referral slip and explained the 2-week wait for a scan. Council members shifted in their seats. Eyes that had been glazed over now flicked to her, to the documents she displayed. Some murmured among themselves. When she finished, there was a moment of hush so profound she could hear her own pulse. Then, as Alessandro stepped beside her, Christian advanced the slideshow to photos of the vacant lot. "We have the resources," Alessandro said firmly, "but we need official approval. Martina's story is just one among thousands." A burst of soft discussion swelled among the council. The official who had once looked disapproving now regarded Martina with something akin to empathy, or at least thoughtful consideration. Another member whispered to her colleague, scanning the project's blueprint on the screen. Finally, the council's chairperson, a woman with gray hair and a calm demeanor, spoke up. "We appreciate your testimony, Miss Rossi. We'll deliberate carefully. The city should aim to support its citizens' well-being." Questions followed, but they were more constructive than adversarial. Christian fielded them with facts. Alessandro offered funding assurances, and Martina's personal account lingered as a powerful undercurrent, giving weight to every word. When the session ended, no definitive vote had been cast yet. It would take a few days or weeks of further discussion. But everyone sensed the momentum had tilted. Alessandro shook Martina's hand gratefully, expression filled with pride. "You were incredible," he said, voice quiet enough that only she could hear over the general hubbub. She exhaled, finally feeling the release of tension. "I just told our truth." They parted ways outside City Hall. Christian left to follow up with certain council members. Alessandro offered to drive Martina home, but she softly declined, reminding him she had her scooter. A subtle regret flickered in his eyes, yet he respected her choice. Even so, as she started up her scooter, she noticed Alessandro watching from the steps. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared certainty that they were forging a path neither had anticipated. Martina gave a small wave and sped off, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. In that moment, it felt as though a door had opened for both of them, not just for the clinic plan, but for two lives that had intersected so unexpectedly. The city's skyline framed them, old stone buildings tinted by the late afternoon sun, as if bearing witness to a quiet shift in fate. And in their separate hearts, Alessandro and Martina felt a cautious hope that perhaps together they could reshape a corner of the world. The next day dawned crisp and clear, washing the city in a gentle golden light that contrasted sharply with the tense expectations looming over the council's pending decision. Despite the promising weather, Martina felt a restless energy knotting in her stomach from the moment she opened her eyes. She had spoken honestly, bravely, she supposed, at the council session. Now all she could do was wait. Morning at the pizzeria was unusually calm, giving her more time to think than she wanted. Instead of the usual rush of orders, she found herself wiping counters and fussing with sauce containers, replaying the council scene in her head. She pictured Alessandro's encouraging nod when she stepped away from the podium, how he'd lightly touched her elbow as if to steady her trembling. For reasons she couldn't quite articulate, the memory made her heart stir with both gratitude and uncertainty. Around mid-morning, Giulio approached her at the front counter. He studied her pensive expression and chuckled softly, resting a friendly hand on her shoulder. "You're anxious, aren't you?" he asked. "Ever since that big meeting, you've been staring off into space, waiting for news?" She tried to smile. "Yes, I guess so. They might vote on the proposal next week. Alessandro said they'd expedite it, but who knows? I just hope it goes through." Giulio patted her arm. "You did what you could, ragazza. Telling your story was brave. Now you have to trust that the right folks will do the right thing." Martina nodded, wishing she shared her boss's easy optimism. Just then, the phone rang. She automatically reached for it, mindful of standard orders, but Giulio waved that he'd handle it. She returned to the kitchen to prepare the next batch of dough, letting the rhythmic kneading calm her frayed nerves. Meanwhile, at the Falcone estate, Christian paced in Alessandro's office, phone clutched in his hand, eyebrows knitted. "I just spoke with Councillor Bassi," he said. "She's leaning our way, impressed by the genuine testimonies. But some other members remain on the fence. They keep talking about the rival developers' promise of generating more tax revenue from those luxury condos." Alessandro glanced up from the table where he sifted through expansions of the building plans. "A short-term gain," he muttered. "That's the problem with these committees. Money for city coffers can overshadow philanthropic benefits. Have you arranged any follow-up presentations for them?" Christian nodded. "Yes. A few councillors agreed to meet next Monday to see more details. We'll highlight the long-term social impact. If we can show them that a healthier community translates into long-term benefits, lower emergency care costs, better workforce engagement, they might set aside the condo plan. But it's an uphill climb." Alessandro's gaze hardened. "Then we keep climbing. I'll host them here if needed. Let them see we're serious." Christian fell silent for a moment. He'd known his cousin all his life, but never had he seen Alessandro so engaged, unwavering in the face of political pushback. Finally, Christian cleared his throat. "And about the personal angle, maybe we can gather more real-life stories like Martina's." That definitely struck a chord. Alessandro set down the blueprint, a faint smile crossing his features. "Yes, it did. She spoke with such sincerity. It was braver than she realizes." He could still picture her at the podium, voice quivering at first, but gradually gaining strength. In that moment, The entire council chamber felt anchored by her authenticity. A quiet pride seeped through him, followed by a flicker of longing. He realized he wanted to see her again, beyond the formalities of pizza deliveries and city politics. Before he could dwell too long on such thoughts, an unexpected knock on the door made them both glance up. It was a housekeeper, holding a small notebook. "Sir," she addressed Alessandro, "the staff meeting is about to start in the main hall. You wanted to speak to everyone about the new philanthropic direction?" Alessandro had almost forgotten. He rose promptly, smoothing his shirt. "Yes, thank you." "Christian, are you coming?" In a moment, his cousin replied, reorganizing his phone messages. "I'll meet you there." The housekeeper led Alessandro down a corridor toward one of the estate's spacious halls, where many of the employees had gathered: maids, gardeners, drivers, and kitchen staff. Typically, the Falcone household held monthly staff meetings about routine matters, schedules, wages, housekeeping standards. But this time, Alessandro intended to announce something else. He cleared his throat, addressing them with a calm seriousness. "I wanted to thank all of you for your ongoing service. This house runs smoothly because of your hard work, and I don't say that enough. But there's more. We're in the midst of launching a large-scale community project, a center and clinic to help the less fortunate. If everything goes well, we might also expand philanthropic efforts here. I'd like each of you to know, if you have ideas, suggestions, or concerns, my door is open." A ripple of surprise went through the room. The staff, many of whom had known Alessandro since he was a child, exchanged looks. It wasn't common for a Falcone heir to open the floor like this. One of the older maids stepped forward hesitantly. "Does this mean we might also do charity drives or sponsor local families?" Alessandro nodded, smiling. "Exactly. We're not just looking at one building. We want to see where we can help. Schools, shelters. And I'd appreciate your input, since many of you have friends or neighbors who might need assistance." An undercurrent of admiration and gratitude flickered on their faces. Alessandro concluded the meeting feeling buoyed by their support. Although the Falcone name had long commanded respect, forging genuine goodwill felt altogether different. Seeing it in the staff's relieved, hopeful eyes reminded him he was on a worthwhile path. That afternoon, after finishing her shift, Martina decided to swing by a discount pharmacy. She needed to purchase compression wraps for her mother's knee. Sophia's discomfort persisted, and the upcoming MRI date still felt painfully distant. The pharmacy's fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows over shelves of medication and bandages. Martina counted her money at the register, noticing she had just enough to buy the wraps and some mild pain relief pills. On her way out, her phone buzzed. She tensed. She rarely received calls outside of work unless it was about her mother. Fishing the device from her bag, she saw a number she didn't recognize. Hesitating, she pressed answer. "Hello?" A woman's voice, warm but brisk, introduced herself as Alessia, an event coordinator working with the Falcone family. "Martina Rossi? I was asked to call on behalf of Signor Alessandro. He's hosting a small gathering tomorrow evening at the estate. City council members, philanthropic contacts. He wondered if you might attend as well, to discuss the clinic project with potential partners." Martina's breath snagged in her throat. Another fancy event? She imagined a group of well-dressed officials sipping cocktails in a grand salon. "I'm not sure I'd fit in," she admitted in a small voice. "I'm just a pizza delivery girl." Alessia sounded reassuring. "Signor Alessandro specifically requested your presence. He believes your perspective is vital. Please consider it. Formal attire isn't strictly required, but something neat would help you feel comfortable." Martina's mind whirled. The invitation alone felt like stepping into a different galaxy. "Okay," she said finally. "I appreciate the invitation. I'll come." As she ended the call, an onslaught of worries flooded in. She had no idea what she might wear, how she would present herself. Yet overshadowing her self-consciousness was a budding sense of excitement. Alessandro wanted her there, in front of donors and officials. Something in that request felt validating, like she wasn't just a token story, but a real partner in shaping this vision. That night, she told her mother about the invitation. Sophia listened with wide eyes, half proud, half anxious. "You deserve to be there, Figlia," she said softly, patting Martina's hand. "You've worked so hard and your voice matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words fortified Martina's resolve. She rummaged in her small closet for an outfit, coming up mostly empty. A threadbare dress she'd worn to a cousin's wedding years before, some mismatched skirts. Eventually, she settled on a simple black skirt and a blouse with delicate sleeves, slightly outdated but in good condition. The following evening arrived swiftly. The Falcone estate glowed under warm lights. At the entrance, staff directed a slow stream of visitors toward a smaller reception room, a tasteful space with plush chairs and a view of the manicured gardens. Soft classical music played in the background. Alessandro greeted each arriving guest, exchanging polite words with council members, philanthropic figures, and potential donors. He wore a tailored suit in slate gray, looking every inch the suave air, though there was a restless edge in his glance as he watched the door. Christian, similarly dressed, chatted with a cluster of city officials near a buffet table. Waiters in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of sparkling water and canapes. After half an hour, the door opened again, and Martina stepped in. Her hair was neatly tied back, her simple blouse pressed, her skirt modest. She clutched a small handbag nervously, scanning the room full of sophisticated strangers. Then her eyes met Alessandro's. The relief and joy on his face were instantly apparent. "Martina," he said, moving swiftly to greet her. "You came." He noticed her tense posture and gently guided her toward a quieter corner. "I'm glad you decided to join us." She forced a steadying breath, summoning a polite smile. "I hope I'm dressed appropriately. This is all a bit overwhelming." "You look perfect," he replied without hesitation. Seeing her uncertain expression, he added more softly, "I mean that sincerely. I'm grateful you're here." A subtle flush warmed her cheeks, but she nodded. Glancing around, she recognized a few council members from the session, one or two smiling politely, others immersed in conversations. She returned small nods of acknowledgement, trying to ease the knot in her stomach. Christian approached, bringing two men in business suits. "Alessandro, Miss Rossi, these gentlemen are from the hospital's volunteer board. They'd like to learn more about our project from a first-hand perspective." Martina inhaled, bracing herself. She remembered how anxious she'd been at the council meeting, yet this felt more relaxed. She drew on her own experiences again, describing the difficulty of scheduling scans and treatments, recounting acquaintances who'd skipped checkups because they couldn't afford transit costs. The men listened intently, occasionally glancing at Alessandro as though surprised by how honest and open this guest was. Through the evening, Martina found herself speaking to different small groups: supporters, potential investors, local doctors. Some responded with genuine interest, some with detached politeness. Yet each time, Alessandro hovered nearby, offering subtle encouragement. If she faltered under a pointed question, he stepped in with data or clarifications. Their unspoken synergy felt natural, as if they'd rehearsed it. But in truth, they were simply two individuals bound by a shared goal, forging a bond that transcended formalities. Later, when the reception eased into more casual mingling, Martina stepped onto the terrace to catch her breath. The garden beyond was illuminated by soft ground lights, revealing fragrant flowers and statues. She leaned on the ornate railing, exhaling relief that her conversations had gone decently. The evening air was mild, laced with the smell of freshly cut grass. A moment later, Alessandro joined her, quietly slipping through the French doors. "You held up admirably," he said, voice gentle. "Everyone I spoke to was impressed by your sincerity." She looked out over the garden. "It's all surreal. A week ago, I was just delivering pizzas. Now I'm at a fancy gathering, trying to convince strangers to fund a community clinic." He nodded, reflecting on the same improbability. Life can shift in ways we never predict. I'm glad our paths crossed. In the hush that followed, their eyes met. The twinkle of distant lights glimmered in the reflection. Martina felt her heart pound. This was more than a philanthropic cause, more than a shared ambition. Beneath the surface, something tender was taking root. For a second, the city's entire swirl of complexities receded, leaving only the quiet testament of two souls who had reached across lines of class and circumstance. Yet the moment was fragile. Martina knew the chasm still loomed. Their differing worlds, expectations, personal burdens. Sensing her hesitation, Alessandro dropped his gaze to the garden. "I hope you'll continue working with us, even if the council approves. The project needs honest voices." She mustered a soft laugh, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "I can't promise I'll be as poised as you in these events, but I'm in this until we see it built." A faint smile graced his lips. "Thank you." He seemed on the verge of saying more. His expression flickered with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. But footsteps behind them ended the hush. Christian appeared, politely clearing his throat. "Sorry to interrupt, but a group from the community board wants to finalize a potential timeline. Alessandro, we need you." Alessandro nodded, the fleeting vulnerability replaced by a composed courtesy. "Of course," he said. "Martina, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. Please help yourself to refreshments. I'll find you later." She watched him walk away, Christian already briefing him in hushed tones. In that instant, her breath caught with the quiet realization that she was no longer an outsider standing at the mansion gates. She'd been ushered in, invited to shape something bigger than herself. And perhaps, in ways neither fully comprehended yet, she and Alessandro were forging a connection that transcended mere circumstance. She lingered on the terrace a while longer, listening to the music drifting from inside, feeling a bloom of possibilities stir within her chest. The garden lights glowed softly, and overhead the city stars were just bright enough to hint at hope. The following morning arrived with a subdued hush, as if the city itself were catching its breath after the long night of conversations and negotiations. Martina awakened early despite getting home late from the reception. Sleep had evaded her. Her mind replayed every interaction, the swirl of unfamiliar faces, Alessandro's quiet pride as he guided her around, the crisp night air on the terrace. The memory of that stillness they'd shared lingered, refusing to fade. She pushed herself out of bed, wincing at the knot of tension in her neck. Her mother, Sophia, was still asleep on the sofa, the television faintly whispering a nature documentary. Martina tiptoed around, quietly preparing breakfast, simple toast and tea, and set aside a portion for her mother whenever she woke. In the back of her mind, she replayed how the event coordinator, Alessia, had referred to her as a key participant in the philanthropic endeavor. It felt surreal. A tiny part of her, a part she scarcely dared to acknowledge, thrilled at the idea of belonging to something so grand. Even so, the day's practicalities pressed in. She needed to get to the pizzeria, handle deliveries, and see if any fresh news had come from the city council. She hoped Alessandro or Christian might phone her if there was an update about the land dispute, but she reminded herself that they were busy men, with countless demands on their time. When she arrived at La Bella Pizza, Giulio greeted her with a broad grin. "Well, well," he teased. "Look who's become quite the society figure. We missed you last night. Everything go all right at that fancy gathering?" Martina's cheeks warmed, but she smiled back. "It was nerve-wracking, but I think it helped. Some potential donors seemed interested in funding the clinic. At least that's what I gathered." Giulio patted her shoulder. "You're doing good work, Martina. Don't let the nerves overshadow that." She nodded gratefully and set about her tasks, rolling dough and preparing toppings. Yet all the while she felt an undercurrent of anticipation, as though waiting for something. some sign to confirm that her presence at the event had truly mattered. Meanwhile, at the Falcone estate, Christian was on the phone before dawn, chasing leads and pinning down appointments. The rivalry with the condo developers had taken a sharper turn. Rumors circulated that the developers' backers were pressing for a quick rezoning to push the Falcone plan aside. The city council was caught in a tug-of-war between philanthropic promise and the lure of immediate tax revenue. Alessandro joined him in the study, hair slightly ruffled from lack of sleep. "Any progress?" he asked, voice low and urgent. Christian ended a call and faced him, exhaling. "Mixed. Some council members who were moved by Martina's testimony still stand with us. But the developers have started a media push, claiming the city needs more housing and tax profits. We'll have to counter that narrative." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "They're twisting the facts. The area we chose was originally zoned for community use, and it's hardly ideal for more luxury units. We need to make that clear." Christian nodded gravely. "I'm preparing a press release. We might also consider a public interview or a small press conference. Show real faces, like Martina's, so the public can rally behind us." At the mention of Martina's name, Alessandro's expression softened. He recalled how composed she'd seemed among the socialites, how her authenticity resonated more than any prepared speech. He tamped down the personal surge of admiration, reminding himself that this project hinged on broad support, not just one testimony. "Yes," he agreed. "If she's comfortable, having her speak publicly could be powerful." A pause stretched. Christian arched an eyebrow, reading Alessandro's subtle shift in tone. "Just be mindful," Christian said gently, "that she may already feel pressured. She's done a lot, standing up in front of council members attending last night's event. We can't rely solely on her." Alessandro nodded, acknowledging the truth. "Of course. We'll seek other community members too, but I'll ask her carefully. No pressure." He returned to the desk, scanning an updated spreadsheet of potential budgets for the clinic. On the sheet, Christian had included contingencies, staff hiring, equipment costs, even a small ambulance for emergencies. It was all feasible, but only if they secured city cooperation and philanthropic backing. The swirling politics made Alessandro's head pound. Yet through the strain, he felt a spark of hope, fueled by that shared drive he'd seen in Martina's eyes. By midday, Martina's routine was cut short by an unexpected call on the pizzeria line. Giulio passed her the phone. She braced herself, half expecting Alessandro or Christian with more project news. Instead, a rushed voice said, "Miss Rossi, this is Dr. Onesti from the clinic. We had a cancellation. There's an MRI slot open for your mother tomorrow at 10 in the morning if you can take it." Martina's heart surged. Yes, absolutely," she replied, pressing the phone tight to her ear. "Thank you so much. We'll be there." A wave of relief washed over her. She ended the call, tears prickling. The 2-week wait was now condensed. Sophia would get her scan sooner. It felt like a small miracle. She quickly explained to Giulio, who grinned widely. "Good news indeed. Now let's hope for equally good results." She couldn't resist the urge to share this relief with someone who cared about the project and her mother's well-being. Before overthinking, she slipped her phone from her pocket and dialed the Falcone estate's number. She half expected a housekeeper or assistant to pick up. Instead, Alessandro's familiar voice came on the line. "Alessandro Falcone speaking." A fluster of warmth rushed through her. "Hello, it's Martina. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Alessandro said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Is everything okay?" She explained about the sudden cancellation at the clinic. "We have the scan tomorrow," she said, her voice unsteady with emotion. I wanted to let you know since you've been so supportive about me sharing our story." Alessandro's tone softened. "I'm relieved for you and your mother. That's wonderful news. Let me know if you need any assistance." "Transportation?" perhaps? She hesitated, recalling how busy he was with city politics. Yet she couldn't deny it would help. Sophia dreaded the crowded buses, especially with her bad knee. "If it's not too much trouble," she said quietly. "We live across town from the clinic and Mama struggles with the bus steps. A taxi is expensive, but I'll manage—" No. I'll arrange a car to pick you both up," he insisted gently. "Truly, it's the least I can do." Relief washed over her again. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot." They ended the call with Alessandro promising to finalize details and confirm a pickup time. Martina found herself smiling, ignoring the curious glance Giulio shot her way. She felt a buoyancy that came not just from the clinic appointment, but from the sense that for all their differences, Alessandro understood the daily struggles plaguing her life. The next morning dawned with a gauzy layer of clouds overhead, the sun peeking shyly through. Martina helped Sophia dress, loose pants for comfort, a soft blouse. Her mother's knee was stiff, but the hope of finally getting the MRI overshadowed the discomfort. By 9 o'clock, a black sedan arrived outside their building, the driver politely stepping out to open the door. Sophia looked overwhelmed by the sleek vehicle. "Are you sure this is all right, Martina?" she whispered as her daughter guided her into the back seat. "It feels too fancy for us." Martina offered a gentle smile. "It's okay, Mama. The Falcone family arranged it so you wouldn't have to climb bus steps. Let's just be grateful." The driver navigated through city streets, pausing at traffic lights. Occasionally, Martina caught Sophia studying the plush seats or the tinted windows, her expression both awed and uneasy. They arrived at the hospital's front entrance, where an orderly was waiting with a wheelchair. The courtesy and speed at which they were handled felt foreign, almost dreamlike, to Martina, who was used to waiting in long lines jostling among crowds. Within minutes, they were checked in and directed to the radiology department. The shift in attitude from the staff, seeing them arrive in a private car, noticing the crisp coordination, likely played a part in the smoother reception. Yet Martina pushed aside any guilt over exploiting the Falcone name. Her mother's care was paramount. As the MRI began, Sophia disappeared behind heavy machinery and glass observation panels. Martina stood anxiously outside, arms hugged around herself. She silently prayed for results that pointed to a solution rather than a worse diagnosis. Waiting in the corridor, she texted Alessandro a brief update, just a polite note that they'd arrived safely, no need to worry. He responded within seconds. "Alessandro, text. Glad you made it. Hoping everything goes smoothly. Let me know when it's done." She appreciated the immediate support, pressing the phone to her chest. Once again, their worlds meshed in a moment of personal vulnerability. Close to an hour later, Sophia emerged, looking disoriented but unharmed. The technician said the doctor would review the images soon and call them in. They settled in a cramped waiting area, chairs lined up under fluorescent lights. The minutes dragged. Finally, a nurse beckoned them into a small consultation room. Dr. Onesti, the same kindly physician who'd called about the cancellation, greeted them. He fiddled with the film scans, his brow furrowing. "The MRI shows degenerative changes in the knee joint," he explained gently. "We expected that, but there's also some inflammation that might be nerve-related. It's not dire, but your mother may need more than medication, possibly minor surgery if physical therapy doesn't alleviate the compression." Martina's face fell. Surgery. The cost, the recovery time, the anxious waiting all over again. She swallowed hard. "Does it have to happen soon?" The doctor sighed. "We'll try conservative treatment first, intense therapy, maybe steroid injections, but if the pain remains severe or the condition worsens, the surgical route could be next. I'd advise scheduling follow-ups quickly." Sophia nodded, lips pressed tight. She seemed relieved it wasn't life-threatening, yet the worry of more bills was evident in her eyes. Martina thanked the doctor for his honesty, and they left with prescriptions and instructions for physical therapy sessions to start in the coming weeks. Outside, the driver patiently waited with the car. Martina helped Sophia inside once more, mind churning about how to handle future expenses. She knew that any surgery, even a minor one, meant crippling costs. For a moment, she let her head rest against the car window, eyes stinging. On the ride home, Sophia reached for Martina's hand. "We'll manage this," she said softly. "We always do, right?" "Yes," Martina whispered, voice trembling with subdued determination. "We will." She thought of Alessandro and the project. If that clinic came to fruition, maybe other families wouldn't face these hurdles. Maybe her mother could benefit too if the facility was equipped for minor surgeries or advanced therapies. The possibility of bridging that gap gave Martina hope, even in the midst of this new uncertainty. As the car neared their modest apartment building, Martina's phone buzzed again. Alessandro had sent another message. "Alessandro, text. How did it go? Everything all right? If you need anything, I'm here," she exhaled, glancing at her mother dozing in the seat. Tears threatened to spill, not just from the stress but from the gentle care he kept extending. She typed a brief reply. "Martina, text. Thank you. MRI suggests possible surgery down the line. It's scary, but we'll handle it. Your help today meant a lot." In that moment, riding through everyday city streets in a car provided by one of the wealthiest families around, Martina recognized that the lines between her life and Alessandro's weren't so sharp anymore. The concern he offered felt genuine. They were forging a thread of connection that might, if nurtured, sustain them through the trials and triumphs looming on the horizon. A brisk wind swept through the city 2 days later, carrying with it the promise of imminent change. Everywhere, the undercurrent of anticipation was palpable. Rumors spread that the city council would soon issue a preliminary ruling on the contested land parcel. Local media outlets churned out reports about the Falcone project, the rival luxury condos, and the potential for a philanthropic clinic. Martina woke early, the same knot of anxious energy burning in her stomach. She could sense that something was shifting. Her own life had become entwined with city politics in a way she never thought possible. Meanwhile, her mother, Sophia, tried to keep her spirits high despite the looming possibility of surgery. They had arranged her first physical therapy session, but even that required more money than Martina felt comfortable spending. The day began like so many others, with Martina juggling pizzeria tasks. She folded boxes, prepped pizzas, and zipped around town on her scooter delivering orders. Yet each time her phone vibrated with a notification, her heart leapt. Would it be Alessandro or Christian with urgent news, or a text from the hospital about updated tests? Her world seemed to be in constant flux, suspended between hope and dread. Around noon, she got a short break. Taking the chance to rest in a corner booth of the pizzeria, she sipped water and scrolled her phone. A local news website flashed a headline: "Rival developer lobbies for zoning change in disputed land. Council split." Martina's stomach clenched. She skimmed the article, reading quotes from council members who insisted the Falcone plan wasn't financially clear, while others argued that the city's health infrastructure desperately needed the proposed clinic. She closed the article, a dull ache forming behind her eyes. They had to succeed. So many families depended on this. And for her mother, the difference between accessible care and an unaffordable private hospital was everything. Giulio strolled over, noticing her downcast look. "Hey, take it easy. You can't solve all the city's problems in one day," he said gently. Martina managed a small nod, grateful for his concern. "I know, boss. Just worried. If the council blocks the clinic, I'm not sure what Alessandro will do next. The project might stall." Giulio hummed sympathetically. "The Falcone name carries weight. If anyone can do it, that family can, and you've helped show them what's at stake. Trust that." She inhaled, forcing herself to trust that indeed. Across town, in a modern glass office building, Christian sat in a meeting with 2 members of the city council. They'd convened on neutral ground for final negotiations. On the table were documents that spelled out the Falcone philanthropic plan in painstaking detail. Budgets, architectural designs, staffing proposals. Christian had carefully prepared every chart, every statistic. But the council members, one a balding man named Cataneo, the other a sharp-eyed woman named Gori, expressed wariness. The developer claims they'll provide a significant boost to local tax revenue, Cataneo pressed. How can you guarantee that your clinic's operating costs won't become a burden on the city? Christian remained unflappable. We have private donors ready to fund it for at least 10 years. After that, the Falcone Charitable Trust can renegotiate. We'll also explore partial insurance reimbursements for outpatient services. Overall, it's significantly cheaper than building a brand new hospital. Gori tapped a pen against the table. And if the trust pulls out in 5 years? We've seen philanthropic projects get abandoned when public interest shifts. Christian slid another folder forward. The Falcone family's financial statements, attesting to our solvency and the legally binding contract we're prepared to sign. If we fail to fund the clinic, the land reverts to city control and can be repurposed. We'd absorb any losses. The city risks nothing. The pair exchanged looks. There was a grudging respect in their expressions. They knew Christian had effectively preempted their usual criticisms. We'll share this with the rest of the council, Gori finally said. Expect an announcement soon. The council may do an initial vote next week to gauge formal support. That's all we ask, Christian replied smoothly. Leaving the office building, he felt a tremor of optimism. But he also knew the rival developers' backroom tactics were far from over. He texted Alessandro, summarizing the meeting, adding that the tide seemed to be turning slowly in their favor. Then, as he slid into his car, Christian pondered the intangible factor that had tipped the scale: Martina's personal testimony. Again and again, the council members brought up real people who needed better care. In Christian's experience, that kind of authenticity was rare in city politics. At the Falcone estate, Alessandro was in the midst of reviewing new philanthropic pledges from local businesses when Christian's update pinged his phone. He read the text with a rush of relief. Tucking the phone away, he leaned back in his desk chair, letting the tension in his shoulders ease just a bit. For days he'd been on edge, fielding endless calls, hosting prospective donors, balancing the Falcone Empire's other obligations. His mind drifted to Martina, how she must be feeling with every new article and rumor swirling. He remembered her anxious eyes whenever the project came up, the hopeful smiles that lit her face when she believed progress was possible. Without further hesitation, he picked up the phone to call her. This time, she answered on the first ring. "Hello?" Her voice sounded breathless, perhaps from the hustle of delivering pizzas. "Hi, it's Alessandro. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Sure," she said, stepping aside in an alley to avoid the midday bustle. "Everything okay?" He gave her the gist of Christian's meeting. Nothing was final, but the council was considering a vote next week. "It's looking better," he concluded. "We're closer to approval than we've ever been." Martina closed her eyes, a wave of relief mingling with excitement. "That's amazing. I really hope it works out. A lot of people are counting on this." Alessandro's tone softened. "You've been a big part of getting us this far, Martina. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. It's resonated beyond what we initially expected." She wasn't sure how to respond, warmth filling her chest at his gratitude. "I'm just one voice," she said, "but if it helps, I'm grateful. And how about you? Are you holding up? This must be exhausting." A dry chuckle escaped him. "It is, but it's worth it. At least I have Christian to handle some details. Maybe once the council gives a green light, we can celebrate. Or at least catch our breath." He paused, as though debating something. Then, in a more tentative tone, "There's a small event tomorrow evening, an informal dinner at the estate with a couple of donors who want to see final designs. Christian will be there, of course, but I'd really value your input. You've seen what everyday families need. Would you be willing to join us? Martina hesitated, remembering the swirl of anxious emotions from the last event, yet she also felt an unmistakable pull, the sense that she belonged at these discussions, that her experiences were more than an afterthought. And, if she were honest, she wanted to see Alessandro again, to share in the momentum they were building. "All right," she said softly. "I'll come. Thank you for asking." Alessandro's relief was evident. "Thank you, Martina. I'll have my driver pick you up if you like. Save you another hectic ride on the scooter in evening traffic." She laughed a little. "That might be nice, yes. My poor scooter is on its last leg, thank you." They said their goodbyes, and Martina returned to the kitchen, her mind alive with anticipation and a budding sense of belonging. Her mother's health, the city's future, her own uncertain path, everything was a tangle of challenges, but at least she wasn't facing them alone. Later that night, Sophia dozed in the living room, an ice pack draped over her knee. Martina sat at the small dining table, updating a personal budget. The potential surgery costs loomed large, overshadowing all else. She chewed her lip, wishing for a miracle. But, short of winning the lottery, they were stuck. The best she could do was keep working and pray the newly spurred philanthropic momentum might eventually help. As she flipped through a medical brochure, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. "Hello, Miss Rossi. My name is Elena from Falcone Estate staff. I'll be driving you tomorrow for the dinner at 7 p.m. Please confirm your address for pickup." Martina typed a quick reply with her building details. A swirl of nerves rushed through her. Another dinner at the estate, another chance to stand alongside Alessandro in a realm far removed from her daily struggle. She briefly contemplated rummaging for nicer clothes, but knew her options were limited. Still, Alessandro had never once made her feel inadequate over appearances. For the 1,000th time, she marveled at how a man so entrenched in wealth could remain grounded. She set her phone aside, smoothing the edges of a utility bill. In the hush of the apartment, she could almost envision a future where city clinics were within reach, where her mother's pain could be managed without a mountain of debt. Maybe the Falcone project wouldn't solve every woe, but it could be a lifeline, and the fact that she, of all people, had become an integral part of that endeavor still amazed her. A faint smile crossed her lips as she stood to check on Sophia. Tomorrow's dinner would be another step, hopefully leading them closer to turning those architectural plans into real walls, real hallways, where patients could find relief. And perhaps, alongside that, she and Alessandro might discover something else, an unspoken connection binding two distinct lives toward a common hope. The next evening arrived swiftly. The sun dipped low in the sky, painting it in soft pink and orange hues. True to her word, Elena arrived in a sleek sedan. Martina kissed her mother's forehead, promised she'd be back soon, and hurried outside. With a professional greeting, Elena opened the door and guided her through the rush-hour traffic to the Falcone estate. This time, as Martina entered the gates, she felt more at ease. The staff recognized her, greeting her politely. She followed Elena through a side corridor into a refined dining room where Alessandro, Christian, and two neatly dressed donors were examining large blueprint scrolls. Alessandro spotted Martina instantly, his face lighting with a quiet smile. "You made it," he said, stepping forward. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," she answered, scanning the room. It was more intimate than the previous gatherings, just 6 of them in total. A smaller table was set with what looked like an elegant yet simple dinner. Roasted vegetables, grilled fish, fresh bread. Soft lighting and subdued classical music played in the background, giving the setting a relaxed ambiance. Christian introduced the donors, a middle-aged couple named Carlo and Miriam, who ran a local chain of pharmacies. They were considering a significant pledge if they believed the clinic would truly serve underprivileged neighborhoods. Alessandro had shown them every financial breakdown, but they wanted a real sense of community need. Carlo extended a hand to Martina. Alessandro told us you have first-hand knowledge of these healthcare gaps. Mind sharing a bit? Martina took a breath, glancing at Alessandro. Sure, she said, voice steady. I've seen long lines at clinics, impossible waiting times for scans, people postponing treatment because they can't afford to travel across town. My own mother might need minor surgery, and even scheduling an MRI was a challenge. Miriam listened intently, her expression softening. My pharmacy chain deals with many patients who struggle to buy medication, but I didn't realize how dire the imaging wait lists could be. Encouraged, Martina recounted more. How seniors often gave up on routine checkups. How children missed early diagnoses because specialized facilities were so far away. She could sense Alessandro and Christian letting her words speak for themselves, stepping in only to provide context about the proposed site's location and how it would cut travel times for thousands of people. Carlo and Miriam exchanged a meaningful look. By the time everyone sat at the dining table, the mood had shifted from cautious inquiry to empathetic resolve. Throughout dinner, Alessandro orchestrated the conversation gently, ensuring Martina felt included, praising Christian's diligence, and quietly acknowledging Carlo and Miriam's philanthropic curiosity. When dessert was served, fruit tarts and coffee, Miriam set down her fork with a decisive nod. "We're in," she said, glancing at her husband, who nodded in agreement. "Our foundation will provide initial funds for equipment and basic staff salaries at least for the first year, if your council approvals come through." "That's fantastic," Christian enthused, already jotting a note to follow up with formal documents. Alessandro's eyes glowed with gratitude. "Thank you both," he said. "This will be a tremendous step. With your support, we can demonstrate readiness to the council in a real, tangible way." Martina felt a surge of triumph, though she stayed modestly quiet. Over these last days, she'd come to understand the vital role that philanthropic partners played in turning a dream into reality. Knowing that her own words had helped sway donors renewed her belief in this improbable mission. After dinner, Carlo and Miriam departed, Christian escorting them to finalize some details. Martina helped Alessandro gather stray dishes. He carried them to a side table, then turned, looking at her with a blend of relief and admiration. "Tonight was a breakthrough," he said softly, "a big step closer to making the clinic happen." She smiled. "I'm glad. It feels good to see people willing to help." He studied her quietly for a moment. "You know, I don't think we could have done this without your voice. Ever since the first time you spoke up at the council, everything's become more human, more urgent. It cut through the usual political noise." She looked away shyly. "You give me too much credit. You and Christian have done so much work. I just told my story." "And that's exactly what people needed to hear," he murmured. The hush lingered, the warmth of the dimmed lights enveloping them. In that suspended moment, it was as though the entire city's tensions ebbed away, leaving only the two of them. Martina felt her pulse quicken, the memory of the terrace conversation echoing between them. This quiet resonance spoke of more than philanthropic synergy, something intangible and tender that neither had quite named. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the hall. Christian returned, brimming with enthusiasm. "They signed a preliminary agreement," he announced. "They'll pledge the funds if the council approves the land. We'll draft the contract in the morning." Alessandro nodded, schooling his expression back to businesslike composure. "Good. We'll move fast so the council sees the full support. Thank you, Christian." Martina watched the cousins exchange determined smiles. Then she caught Alessandro's glance sliding her way once more, a subtle trace of warmth in his eyes. Beyond the ephemeral success of the evening, she sensed an unspoken thread tugging at them both, weaving them closer into a shared journey that was about far more than city council votes and medical facilities. It was about believing in each other, and perhaps discovering amid their disparate worlds that they were no longer so far apart. Rain pattered against the pizzeria windows the next morning, droplets blurring the view of passing cars and bustling pedestrians. Despite the dreary weather, Martina felt a hum of optimism crackling in her veins. Last night's success at the Falcone estate, securing that pledge from Carlo and Miriam, still resonated like a quiet victory drum. She went about her dough-kneading and order-taking with renewed energy, replaying in her head how Alessandro had looked at her when thanking her for her role in everything. Then reality jabbed its elbow in. She spotted the new therapy receipts pinned on the kitchen corkboard, total sums she could scarcely cover with her current shifts. Briefly, her determination wavered. Even if the Falcone clinic broke ground tomorrow, it wouldn't be open soon enough to solve her mother's immediate costs. But at least it would help others down the line, she told herself, trying to rekindle her hope. By midday, the pizzeria grew busy. Giulio hustled between the front counter and the kitchen, directing staff with loud good humor. Martina hardly had a spare moment to check her phone until well past 1 o'clock. Finally, she stepped aside, wiping sweat from her brow, and saw a missed call from a number she recognized as belonging to Christian. Pulse quickening, she hurried to return it. Christian's voice came on the line, sounding brisk but excited. "Martina, sorry I missed you. I have big news. The city council scheduled an emergency session for tomorrow morning. They're tired of the controversy dragging on, so they'll hold a preliminary vote on whether to grant the permit for the Falcone clinic or rezoning it for the condo developer. We need to be there in force." Her heart thudded. "Tomorrow morning? That's sudden, but I'll come." "We'd love that," Christian confirmed. "If you're comfortable speaking again, it might make all the difference. The meeting's at 9, City Hall main chamber." She swallowed, recalling the tension of speaking publicly. But there was no question. She had to do it. "Yes," she said. "I'll be there." "Perfect. Alessandro will be presenting updated documents. We'll also mention last night's donor pledge. We suspect the developers will try to overshadow it, but this is our best shot at tipping the scale." After hanging up, Martina leaned against the pizzeria's tiled wall, absorbing the gravity of tomorrow's confrontation. She flashed back to the nights of anxious planning, the speeches, the donors. It all came down to this final decision. If the council voted yes, the land would be secured for the clinic, and groundbreaking could begin within months. If they voted no, the entire effort could collapse under the weight of real estate profits. Turning to Giulio, she quickly explained the situation. He offered a supportive grin. "Go, ragazza. I can cover your shift. The future clinic's more important." With a rush of gratitude, she nodded, trying to calm the storm of nerves swirling in her gut. That evening, after finishing her deliveries, Martina hurried home. Sofia lay on the sofa, her knee elevated, flipping through an old family album to distract herself from the dull ache. When her daughter arrived, face flushed with tension, she set the album aside. "What's wrong, Cara? You look like you've seen a ghost." Martina sank into the lumpy armchair. "The council votes tomorrow. If they approve, the Falcone clinic moves forward. If not—" Her voice trailed off, too unsure to finish. "I'm speaking again, though I don't know what more I can say." Sofia closed the album, searching her daughter's face. "Just speak the truth, as you always do. Show them our reality. No fancy words needed." A tremor of relief and worry commingled in Martina's chest. She reached out to squeeze her mother's hand. "I'll try, Mama. Maybe if they see how urgent it is, they'll do the right thing." But that night, sleep evaded her. She tossed on the sofa, mind conjuring worst-case scenarios. The council siding with the rival developer, condemnation from critics who thought she was just a naive pizza girl stepping above her place. Near dawn, she dozed off out of sheer exhaustion, only to jerk awake at the alarm, half dreaming of city officials waving condo blueprints in her face. She rose quietly, not wanting to disturb Sofia, and prepared tea to steady her nerves. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror revealed tired eyes but a determined set of the jaw. This was it, the final push. Shortly after 8, a knock sounded at the door. A driver from the Falcone estate greeted Martina politely, ready to take her to City Hall. She'd chosen simple clothes again, plain slacks and a tidy sweater. No sense pretending to be someone else. As she locked up behind her, Sophia offered a faint wave from the couch, calling out a gentle "Buona fortuna" that rang in her ears as she descended the building stairs. The drive to City Hall felt surreal. Skyscrapers loomed overhead, the bustle of the city forming a dull roar outside the car windows. She dabbed her palms on her sweater, heart hammering. Arriving in front of the grand stone columns, she thanked the driver and slipped out. Reporters clustered near the entrance, brandishing microphones, jostling for quotes from passers-by. The Falcone project had indeed become headline news. Martina spotted Alessandro and Christian at the base of the steps, both in sharp suits, flipping through thick folders of documents. Alessandro's face lit up as she approached. "You made it," he said. He took in her anxious expression and lowered his voice. "Remember, no matter what happens, your presence here is a victory in itself." His steady tone eased her pounding heart. Christian gestured for them to proceed inside. "They'll start soon," he said. "Our seats are near the front." The council chamber was packed, a throng of spectators filling the benches behind them. Martina recognized a few faces. The older council members from the first meeting, the middle-aged woman, Gori, who had questioned Christian. On the far side of the aisle, a group of well-dressed people whispered among themselves, the rival developers' team, presumably. She swallowed, feeling their stares like needles on her back. The council chair called the session to order, voice echoing through the microphone. "Today we address Item 4B, Proposed Philanthropic Medical Center by the Falcone family, versus the alternative rezoning request from Northbridge developers." A hush fell. Christian presented first, detailing the clinic's design and finances. He cited new pledges from Carlo and Miriam's foundation. Then Alessandro rose, speaking with a carefully controlled passion about how his family's wealth could be channeled for public good. He reminded the council that this land had originally been set aside for civic use. "This is an opportunity," he said calmly, "to fulfill that promise, to help the city. Luxury condos can be built elsewhere. A medical center cannot." A few council members nodded. Others looked unmoved. Next came the rival developer's representative, who rattled off projected property taxes, job creation, and economic growth. Their polished PowerPoint boasted glittering images of high-rise living, claiming the city's budget shortfalls needed the boost. Martina felt her frustration coil. Every promise they made focused on money, while ignoring how many residents suffered without proper care. After the formal pitches, the chair announced, "We'll open the floor to public comments before the vote. Are there any citizens wishing to speak?" At Alessandro's gentle nudge, Martina stood, heart pounding. She approached the lectern, clearing her throat. The sea of eyes weighed on her. Council members, the developer's scornful gaze, scattered journalists scribbling notes. She drew a breath, recalling her mother's advice. "My name is Martina Rossi," she began, voice wavering but gaining strength. "I'm not a politician or a real estate expert, just someone who sees the daily struggle for medical access. My mother waits weeks for tests she should have done in days. Families in my neighborhood can't afford private clinics, so they delay treatment until it's too late. This city has thousands like us, people who work hard but can't catch a break with health care." She paused, scanning the faces in front of her. "If we ignore that in favor of building condos, what does it say about our priorities?" Her words echoed in the hush. She caught a glimpse of Alessandro's expression, pride, encouragement, gratitude all mingling in his eyes. Summoning a final surge of courage, she ended, "I implore you, let's not pick short-term revenue over human well-being. This clinic won't solve every problem, but it'll be a step toward a city where health isn't a luxury." The chamber erupted in soft murmurs. She returned to her seat, hands trembling. Christian gave her a nod of approval. Alessandro whispered, "Perfect," under his breath. A few more voices spoke, some for, some against. One older man recounted how his disabled wife had been forced to travel across town for basic therapy, nearly bankrupting them. Another insisted the city was falling behind on housing demands. The tension mounted. Finally, the chair raised a hand, calling for order. "We'll proceed to the vote. Council members, you have the proposals. A yes indicates granting the Falcone Clinic permit. A no indicates we shift toward rezoning for Northbridge developers. Our clerk will call the roll." The clerk stood, reading each council member's name. One by one they stated their vote. Martina's pulse roared in her ears. The early votes split nearly evenly. Gori said yes, Cataneo said no. A third, yes, a fourth, no. The air felt electric, each word intensifying the hush. Then a tipping point approached. One councillor paused dramatically before saying yes, pulling them ahead by a single vote. Another said no, tying it. All eyes shifted to the final name. Councillor Bassi, who had privately expressed support to Christian but was known for being unpredictable. Silence stretched unbearably. Bassi cleared her throat, glancing down at her notes. Then she lifted her gaze, scanning the room. Her voice came measured. "I vote yes." An audible exhalation swept the chamber. For a second, Martina hardly processed it. Then applause broke out among the Falcone supporters. Christian patted Alessandro's back, relief shining on his face. Martina felt an overwhelming flood of emotion, tears gathering in her eyes as a grin broke across her cheeks. They'd done it. The council had approved the clinic land permit, by a razor-thin margin, but it was enough. Furious muttering erupted on the developer's side, but the majority of the council was already shaking hands or clapping politely, acknowledging the outcome. The chair rapped the gavel. "Motion passes. Falcone Philanthropic Project is granted preliminary approval. The city will finalize conditions in the coming weeks. Session adjourned." Martina could barely stand, her legs trembling. Alessandro caught her arm, guiding her away from the commotion. "You were incredible," he murmured near her ear, voice thick with relief and gratitude. "Thank you for everything." She laughed shakily, tears threatening to spill. "We actually did it." "Yes," Christian interjected, appearing at their side, beaming. "The real work begins now. Architects, timelines, so many details, but the land is ours to develop, and we have the city's blessing." Martina nodded, her thoughts spinning to the thousands who would finally have accessible care, to her mother's uncertain future. Even if it wouldn't fix everything right away, a powerful step had been taken for the city's most vulnerable. Reporters swarmed in for quotes. Alessandro and Christian smoothly deflected some, while Christian promised a formal press briefing later. Martina, overwhelmed, tried to step back, but a reporter singled her out anyway. "Miss, how do you feel about this victory? What's your connection to the Falcone family's project?" She swallowed, glancing at Alessandro. He offered a subtle nod of encouragement, letting her decide if she wished to speak. Gathering her composure, she looked at the reporter. "I'm just someone who knows how badly people need this clinic," she said softly. "It's not about me. It's about everyone in this city who can't get the care they deserve." Then, as cameras flashed, she turned away, feeling Alessandro's gentle hand at her elbow once more, guiding her through the crowd. Outside the chamber, the hall reverberated with excitement. Somewhere in that swirl, Martina realized with a swell of humility that they'd not only claimed a plot of land, they'd forged a bond of purpose, maybe even something deeper. She met Alessandro's eyes, acknowledging the journey they'd shared. In that unspoken moment, both knew the real building had only just begun. A subdued glow of the late afternoon sun filtered through the glass walls of a newly constructed lobby, illuminating the polished floors and the fresh paint's faint aroma. Nearly 6 months had passed since the day the city council approved the Falcone Clinic. Now the fruits of countless meetings, negotiations, and late-night phone calls stood tangible. The Community Health Center, a beautifully designed structure of pale brick and large windows, finally neared its official opening. Outside, a modest crowd gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Local families, city council members, donors like Carlo and Miriam, even a few curious journalists. At the forefront, a simple red ribbon stretched across the double doors. Around it bustled the excited hum of possibility. Alessandro and Christian oversaw the finishing touches, verifying the final checks with the staff who would run the clinic's reception and waiting areas. In the adjoining hallways, gleaming medical rooms awaited their first patients, stocked with diagnostic machines, basic labs, and even a small pharmacy. Construction was still underway on the upper floors, where a rehabilitation suite and expanded services would open in phases. But for now, it was enough to serve the neighborhood that so desperately needed help. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Martina felt her chest tighten with emotion. She had stopped by on her scooter, now running better after she'd finally saved enough for repairs, to witness this long-awaited milestone. Dressed in her familiar modest attire, she scanned the event with a mix of pride and humility. Nearby, Sophia leaned on a cane, her knee still healing but her countenance radiant. The physical therapy had eased some of her pain, though the question of possible surgery remained. Still, seeing this clinic on the verge of opening reminded both mother and daughter that hope could be fashioned from determination. "Martina, you made it!" Alessandro's voice rang out, gentle and pleased. He had stepped away from the swarm of officials to greet her and Sophia. She smiled at him, feeling the same subtle warmth she always did in his presence. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. You did it, Alessandro. You and Christian and everyone else. You turned an idea into something real." He glanced around at the building's facade, the excited faces. "Not me alone," he corrected quietly. "This place owes a debt to people like you, people who gave our work meaning." Just then, Christian approached with a pair of large ceremonial scissors. "We're starting soon," he informed them. To Sophia he added politely, "Would you like a closer spot by the ribbon, Signora Rossi? We have chairs in the front row." Sophia blushed, surprised by the courtesy. "That would be nice," she murmured, letting Christian guide her through the small throng of attendees. Martina and Alessandro followed, exchanging fleeting smiles whenever the hustle of the crowd parted them for a moment. She realized with a minor thrill that she'd become accustomed to his quiet companionship and the way he always kept a careful eye on her comfort. Soon the makeshift podium near the ribbon was occupied by dignitaries. Councilwoman Gori began with opening remarks, lauding how cooperation between private philanthropy and civic interest could yield positive change. A few more officials spoke, highlighting the clinic's expected impact. Then Alessandro took the podium, speaking with a calm, collected fervor that commanded attention. "This center," he said, pausing to glance at the building behind him, "is a testament to what happens when we value people above profit. My family contributed funds, yes, but it was the voices of everyday residents that shaped our vision. People who deserve access to healthcare, close to home. People who shouldn't have to weigh their finances against their health." His gaze flicked toward Martina, and for an instant, the faintest trace of a smile softened his features. "We have more to do," he continued, "but this is a step forward. Thank you to the city, our donors, our tireless staff, and most of all, the community for believing in this dream." Thunderous applause erupted from the crowd. Onlookers, local families, the newly hired medical personnel. Christian joined Alessandro at the ribbon, and together they lifted the ceremonial scissors. Snip. The cut was made, and cheers resounded. The doors swung open, symbolizing the official start of the clinic's operations. Reporters snapped photos as attendees flooded in to explore the gleaming reception area, the colorful waiting lounge designed to be child-friendly, and the hallways lined with bright posters about preventive care. Martina slipped through the entrance, her heart surging at the sight of what once existed only in sketches on a table in the Falcone mansion. Sophia gazed around in awe. "I never thought I'd see something like this in our neighborhood," she murmured, leaning on her cane. "To have a place so welcoming, so close." Martina nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Me neither, Mama. They did it so well." She rested a hand lightly on Sophia's arm, grateful they both could witness this moment. Across the lobby, Alessandro showed a few city officials the new exam rooms, demonstrating adjustable hospital beds and modern equipment. His presence was magnetic, yet all the while Martina sensed his attention would occasionally drift in her direction, like a silent acknowledgement, ensuring she experienced the joy of this milestone too. After the initial crowd dispersed, the staff guided visitors to a small reception area where refreshments were laid out. Martina and Sophia found a quiet corner, accepting cups of fruit punch. Christian joined them, face flushed with victory. "Now you'll have an easier time with follow-up checkups, Signora Rossi," he said warmly to Sophia. "We're opening therapy rooms soon. Maybe you'll be our first patient." Sophia laughed, a soft, relieved sound. "I'd be honored." Martina watched her mother's smile and felt a weight lifting. Even if surgery still lurked, at least part of her treatment could happen here. They might not need to scramble across the city or face enormous bills for every simple procedure. She inhaled, letting herself revel in a rare moment of peace. Then Alessandro approached, tie slightly askew as if he'd been rushing. "So, what do you think?" he asked, gesturing around. "Does it look like what you envisioned?" Martina nodded. "Honestly, it's more than I expected. Warm, welcoming. You can feel that it's meant for real people, not just empty gestures." He studied her a second, his voice turning hushed. "I'm glad you think so." A delicate tension simmered between them, as if 1,000 unspoken words lingered beneath polite conversation. Christian, sensing their moment, coughed lightly. "I'll, check on something," he announced, stepping away. Sophia took the hint, too. "I might find a seat near the door," she told Martina, hobbling off with a knowing smile. That left Martina and Alessandro alone, the murmurs of conversation swirling around them, but not close enough to intrude. He took a small breath, searching her face. "I've been meaning to say this for a while, but we've been so busy." Martina tilted her head, heart fluttering. "Yes?" His hesitation was brief, then he pressed on. "Working on this clinic has been life-changing, and I owe a huge part of that transformation to you. Not just your story, but who you are, the courage you showed, your willingness to keep speaking up. You reminded me why any of this matters. You made it personal, real." Her cheeks warmed. "I only shared what I'd lived, Alessandro. You're the one who turned it into action." He shook his head, gaze warm. "Don't downplay your part. You've changed how I see everything. My family's resources, what I want my legacy to be." A faint quiver passed through Martina's chest, half thrill, half fear. The difference in their backgrounds, fortunes, and social circles still loomed. And yet for months, they'd stood side by side, forging something that bridged those gaps. Perhaps that was the real lesson, that compassion and determination could unite even the most unlikely paths. She swallowed, forcing her doubts aside for a moment. "I'm glad our paths crossed, too. You know, at first, I was terrified. I thought I was just a pizza delivery girl who somehow got stuck in a world of big money and politics. But then I saw what you were trying to do, and I realized I could help. We helped each other." He exhaled, relief and something like adoration coloring his features. Around them, families explored the new corridors, council members shook hands with smiling doctors, a world changed by their joint effort. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, catching the dust motes in a gentle glow, painting a backdrop of promise. Alessandro's voice softened to near whisper. I know we come from different worlds, but everything we've shared, every step of building this clinic, has shown me that you belong wherever you choose to be, especially here. He paused, almost shyly. If you ever wanted to walk this next journey together, I'd be honored. Martina's pulse pounded. She glanced at the swirling activity, then back at him. I want that, she said quietly, meeting his eyes. I wasn't sure how to say it, but yes. His chest rose with a held breath, then a gentle, unguarded smile. They didn't seal the moment with a grand gesture or dramatic kiss, conscious of the public setting. Yet the understanding between them felt more profound than any formal declaration. Just then, a new wave of visitors poured in, some wanting to congratulate Alessandro, others curious about the facility. He acknowledged them graciously, but his eyes lingered on Martina, a silent promise that this conversation wasn't over. While Christian ushered dignitaries around, Martina rejoined her mother, who observed everything with tearful joy. Nearby, staff members began hanging up a sign that read, "Welcome to the Falcone Community Health Center, open to all." That sign said it all, Martina thought. A place open to all, just like a future that might finally open its doors to someone like her, unbounded by the walls of class and circumstance. For the first time in years, Martina believed that wholeness was possible. Her mother could receive the care she needed, and perhaps the glimmers of affection that flowed between her and Alessandro could grow into something lasting. Standing at the heart of the new clinic, amid echoing footsteps and lively voices, Martina found her gaze wandering back to Alessandro across the room. He caught her eye, sending the briefest nod, a quiet understanding. The city they both loved had changed, and so had they. Outside, the rain clouds had dispersed, revealing an afternoon sky washed clean by the sun. And as Martina stepped forward to greet the next round of visitors, a deep peace settled in her heart. Despite the uncertainties that still lay ahead, Sophia's health, the challenges of fully staffing and operating the clinic, navigating a relationship that crossed social boundaries, she believed in the future they were building. Together, in the hush of this healing place they'd helped create, they could face whatever might come next. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.